Hey everybody, today we're going to make some concrete planters. Hi. This is my sketchbook. And that's me. For today's project, we're going to make some concrete planters. To soften the brutal aesthetic of the concrete, we're going to add some wooden bases. Not only will the wood contrast nicely with the concrete, but it will add extra functionality to the planters. The wooden bases will help absorb some of the water that leaks from the planters, and also help prevent against scratches on the surfaces below. As a twist, we're going to be using the architectural technique of board-formed concrete, so the formwork of one of the planters is going to be a little bit more complex, but should be well worth it in the end. So let's close up the sketchbook and get started. Step 1. Build formwork. So here I'm cutting out a piece of white pine, from which we'll cut out 30 slats, which we'll use for the bases as well as the formwork. To help make sure each piece was identical, I set up a stop block using a clamp and an old piece of 2x4. To avoid any rip out, I made sure to take my time when doing the cuts. Here they are. Oops. Dragged out the table saw for the final cuts. For the interior part of the formwork, we're going to use some rigid foam sheathing. This will make it easy to take out once the concrete has fully cured. In hindsight, I should have only scored it once and snapped it off. Here I'm just cutting all the way through. The cuts would have came out a lot cleaner, but since this is going to form the inside of the planter, it doesn't really matter. It'll be covered in dirt. With the hot glue gun, we'll glue it all together. I sealed the gap between each layer to make sure no concrete would seep in. Once I knew everything fit into place with the dry assembly, I went ahead and glued it all together. Each piece of wood will leave its own mark on the cured concrete. The second planter was a lot more simple. There you go. I added polyurethane to the formwork so that the wood didn't dry out the concrete while it was curing. In total, I put 3 layers. and I left it to dry overnight. For one of the bases, I needed some thicker pieces, so I glued the slats together. So once my pieces have dried, I'm going to sand them clean and I'll bring them over to the miter saw. Gotta clean your workstation. I set my miter saw to 45 degrees and then cut off the ends of my new pieces. Once again, I used a stop block to make sure the pieces were identical. I laid out all my pieces in a straight line, taped them together, added a little bit of glue, then I folded everything into place. And dropped in the bottom. Back at my workbench, I started work on the second base. I drew out some guides to help me out. One at a time, I glued the pieces together. Back outside, I sanded everything down with some 150 grit sandpaper. Then I polished everything off with some Danish oil. Once everything dries, the bases will be ready. I finished up the formwork, making sure that the gap between the foam and the wood was even. I mixed up some concrete and poured it into the formwork. I did my best to pat out all the air bubbles and also smoothen out the surface so it was nice and flat. I let the concrete cure for 3 days. I probably should have waited 7, but it turned out okay. Before removing the formwork, I drilled a few drainage holes. I made sure to use a percussion drill so that I didn't crack the concrete. Now comes the fun part, removing the formwork. I took it off a little early, but I kinda like the imperfections. Once everything was cleaned up, I applied some concrete sealant so that everything was waterproof. While everything was drying, I took a little break. Throw in a bit of dirt, and our planters are done. Did you guys like this video? Hit that like button below, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys next week. A lot of bugs here. Gosh.